Okay. This first lecture I'm going to do is going to briefly discuss one of the sections we skipped through because of our COVID time crunch. The section on what was happening in Southeast Asia at the period. So we're gonna say, look, after the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union under Stalin was sending people out around the world, especially in Asia, where the Europeans had colonized much of that land, and they were trying to get Asian countries to turn communist. Right, it was part of the dream was that communism was going to have to spread. This group that did this was called Comintern. It was founded in 1919. And by the 1920s, most Asian countries had a communist party growing within their country. French Indochina in Southeast Asia, this area right here, you see on the map that was ruled by the French, had a strong communist party and a leader you see here by the name of Ho Chi Minh. Remember that. Remember that guy. He will become significant later. The Chinese government had a strong communist party as well. Now we're going to move into China. And I'm going to take us back because we haven't really discussed China in this class since the beginning of our year in September, say. And I want to take a look at the history of the Chinese dynasties. China has always been an advanced country. That historically was maybe had periods where it was the single most advanced country in the world. And if you remember, you might have seen this before, the Shang dynasty going back to 2000 BC. We have multiple dynasties with warring periods. Very important Han dynasty that will last for 300 years. Then we have a period of warring, followed by the Sui dynasty, the Tang dynasty, another 300 years, the Song dynasty for another 300 years. And it's in these two dynasties that arguably China is the most powerful country on earth. Most advanced, they have inventions. They invent guns and gunpowder and bombs well before the rest of the world, hundreds of years before. The bicycle, the compass, really Chinese silk and pottery, which we sometimes call China. It's the white with the blue print, was sought after and expensive around the world. Many people would suggest that during this period, China is the most powerful and advanced country in the world. This Yuan dynasty is when the Mongols ruled for less than 100 years. And then the Ming dynasty lasts for another 300 years, followed by the Qing dynasty, which lasts for another 300 years. China has always been a great civilization. But during this last two dynasties, we're going to see that China stops progressing. And if you look at the dates, you'll see that this is about the beginning of the European Renaissance. And we're going to find that Europe's going to come and eventually pass by China in terms of technological advancements, scientific advancements, inventions, and such. There's a famous moment where a Chinese man travels the world. He goes to Africa, he goes to the Middle East. He comes back with like a giraffe from Africa and like different artifacts, and he says, the rest of the world has nothing to offer, let's cut them off. And this turns out to be a big mistake for China, because where we're going to pick up today, around 1911, China has been passed by a lot. Okay, China, once the greatest civilization on earth for arguably 600 years, has now gone downhill and become one of the least advanced places on earth. The Europeans had moved in the 1800s. They had sectioned off China, each European country taking what's called as a sphere of influence, where they could trade their stuff in this area, where they could push their Christianity in this area, And although they don't directly rule and they never actually take China, they allow the Chinese government to stay in place. They're very influential in China. And again, China is so far behind Europe militarily that they just kind of let it go. The Opium Wars, the British agree to make the Chinese agree that they can sell opium there. Opium is what's the base for heroin. Okay, this is a hardcore drug that the British are now selling as their main export in China. So China has sunk to depths that it could never have been imagined during this period. Okay, whoa, that one went upside down. Give me a second. So China had spent centuries trying to keep the West out, and their military didn't keep up. In fact, Japan had become more powerful when in 1854 they allowed the US to come in, trade ideas and technology with them, and Japan was now more powerful than China. But when Russia started spreading communism, we're going to see that many in China are happy to join it. The Russians were also against the European colonialism, and this was appealing as well to the Chinese. Now, there's a guy named Sun Yat-sen who has an incredibly interesting history, and I wish I had time to teach it. China's history is fascinating. But around this time, we're going to see that the last dynasty ends, and there's a period of warring where no one is really in charge, or who's in charge, I don't know. There's a warlord period. There's fighting between nationalists, communists. It's a mess. Okay, and really the most influential guy is a guy named Sun Yat-sen, who's on the side of the Chinese nationalists. He is kind of for democracy, but also kind of for communism. He's willing to work with the communists. In 1926, he and the communists fight side by side. But he's going to die soon thereafter. And now there's a new fight to see who's going to take control of this group that was becoming the most powerful group in China under Sun Yat-sen. And we're going to see a guy by the name of Chiang Kai-shek who's going to take over. And he does not like the communists. He is going to ally himself with the Western countries, with the US and Britain and France. And he's going to fight the communists. He first attacks the communists in Shanghai, killing thousands, the biggest city in China. And he decides that he's not going to worry about Japan, who, oh, by the way, has taken Korea from China and huge chunks of land in the northeast and in modern-day Manchuria. But instead, he's going to focus on fighting the communists. Was he being influenced by the Western powers? So after the massacre, many Chinese go in hiding in Shanghai, in the big city. Others go running up into the northern region up here. Okay, there's a mountainous region in the north, and they're led by a guy named Mao Zedong. Remember that name. 1931, Chiang Kai-shek had spent all of his time and effort trying to get the Chinese out of Shanghai. The city of Shanghai is right here in southern China. Historically, this had been the more advanced, more populated part of China. This would be Manchuria, where the Japanese had taken huge chunks of land. And Chiang decides he's going to now try and root out the communists in the north. He thinks that if he can unify China, then maybe he can then focus on Japan. Again, there's always that question, was he being influenced by the Westerners who were against communism, by the British, by the US? But at this point, we're going to see that China is at war with itself. That a group led by Chiang Kai-shek has tried to unite China and was focusing on attacking the communists instead of attacking the Japanese, who were taking more land than the communists were taking.